What's good, squad? Welcome back to another video, man. Hope everybody's having a good day. If you're not, you will. I got you guys for 3 disturbing true beach horror stories by Mr. Nightmare. As y'all know, I got a couple of his videos on my channel already. I got a playlist. I made one already with true crimes, all that, NFL, all that. So make sure to go check that out. The original link to this video will be in the description down below. Instagram in the description down below. As always, man, let's get into this video. Straight up, let's go.
Talk about today's sponsor, Fume. We all have bad habits, and sometimes breaking these habits can be tough, like when you're out with friends.
Story number 1.
Until I was about 25, I lived in a beach town. My specific neighborhood was about a 20-minute walk from the beach. I'd say about 80% of my personality was beach-related. I've been surfing longer than I've been able to speak.
You want to
it
be
would be
real,
an anomaly
bro?
for me to shake out a pair of shoes and not
like
have some amount of sand
never
fall
ever,
out.
bro. I swear on my life.
My two
bro.
best friends, let's call them Armand and Chuck, were extroverted, outgoing, and charismatic. We were all 18, very much obsessed with girls.
I do not remember.
It was a Saturday night in late May, just a few weeks before school let out. Senioritis had long since set in, and at this point, my friends and I regularly pushed the limits of how much we could get away with without getting in trouble. We already had our coveted college acceptances, so we didn't really care much about high school anymore. Armand and I had plans to meet up with 2 girls from our high school that we'd been getting along with really well at school. The plan was to pick the 2 of them up in the evening and enjoy a cool, breezy night on the beach. We had blankets and a few bottles of wine, the perfect combinations for stargazing on the beach.
But I know, like during hurricane season like it is right now, man, them houses be fucked up.
I don't condone drinking and driving to any capacity, but I was just a stupid kid. I arrived at Sophia's house just after 9. Her and Fran sort of walk danced to the car. It was clear that they had a little something to drink beforehand. Armand and I exchanged some excited grins. It was going to be a fun night. I took a scenic route to a scenic beach. It was about a 30-minute drive. The whole time, the 4 of us were having a great time in the car, cracking jokes and talking about some mutual friends. At one point, Fran and I were having a very deep philosophical conversation about the nature of time and death and such. We were all very much enjoying each other's company. The specific beach I had chosen had a dirt path that you could drive a car up. From there was a more narrow sand path that we would walk. The path was actually pretty steep, but I had picked it because we were less likely to encounter any other people at such a secluded
right in the
spot.
middle of a hurricane right now.
Furthermore,
this it's supposed to hit. Well, it's technically supposed to hit tomorrow morning, but we're supposed to get the storm and shit tonight.
The beach was further away from the main boardwalk, so the sky would be clearer for stargazing. I thought of everything. I parked my car as far up the dirt road as possible, and the 4 of us hopped out. Armand and I carried the blankets and wine. I'll fast forward through the boring stuff. After a few hours and an empty bottle, Armand and I found ourselves separating. He and Fran walked up the beach, and Sophia and I walked in the opposite direction. After being separated by a decent amount of distance and darkness, I threw my blanket down and we drunkenly fell asleep on top of it. Before anything happened, Sophia tensed up. At first, I thought it was something that I had done, but then she whispered something. "Do you hear that?" I focused my attention and strained my ears, trying to hear something other than the gentle crashing of ocean waves. I assumed.
Did you hear that?
Assumed she was just drunk, but then, to my surprise, I did hear something. It sounded almost like a whirring, like the sound a small engine would make. The sound seemed to be moving around. I couldn't pin down where it was even coming from. Then it seemed to fade away into nothingness. "It's nothing," I assured her, eager to resume what we had been doing.
It's already
That's what
nighttime.
we did. Soon after,
It's time
I
to go
fished my
home,
shirt
gang.
for the sand and shook it out before throwing it over
Black
my
for
head.
this shit.
Just then, Sophia, who was still lying on the blanket, shrieked. I whipped around to look at her and saw she was pointing up at something. I looked up, but couldn't see anything besides the blackness of the sky. I sat down next to her to get a better angle, and I was horrified. From her point of view, the moon was perfectly aligned with what appeared to be a drone floating directly overhead.
See, this is what I'm
It hovered
talking
a little
about.
while
People
longer
are that
before zipping up into
creepy.
the dark sky and disappearing out.
People are that creepy, bro. They will spy on your ass with a drone. Like, you don't know what a nigga got going through his head, bro. He could do anything. I seen videos of people poking holes through people's showers to peek into their next door neighbors, all types of shit. People are weird as fuck.
Out of sight. It all made
And that's just
sense.
the world we live
That
in.
noise that we had heard before was 100%
Which is
the
sad,
drone.
gang.
I got angry at myself for not realizing at the time. I then got sick at the thought of being watched that entire time. I glanced over at Sophia and could tell she had the same exact feeling. She put her head in her hands and started crying. I consoled her as best I could before suggesting we walk back to the car. The two of us made it to the car to find Armand and Fran already there. I quickly explained the situation. The two of them were dumbfounded, and I could feel the joy in the air literally being sucked out. I began driving in silence in the direction of Sophia's house, eventually trying to lighten the mood with some conversation.
Hell nah.
It didn't work though. The girls
Kinda
agreed
lighten
that
the
they didn't
mood.
feel safe
Nigga,
going
I would have
home
been
just
off
yet.
too.
It was a Saturday night, so I didn't mind staying out late. I asked if we could hang out at either of their houses. They both shook their heads, saying their parents wouldn't allow it. My house was off the table for the same reason, as was Armand's. I decided to ask Armand to call up Chuck, which he did. Chuck's house was massive, and
Yeah, straight up. If you have a black mom, bro, or if you have any strict parent, but I only know this for sure for black people, gang. You can't have your friends over the crib. Let's be for real. You can't have nobody over that bitch. You got a crumb in the floor, be like, what's that mess? That's just every black mom. I feel like that's just it, bro.
his parents were super chill.
Can't
It
be.
was honestly
just
the
me,
perfect
gang.
spot. To our delight, Chuck was free.
No, it's not just.
I pulled into
I
Chuck's
know a few
driveway and
people
parked the
moms
car.
who do it.
Armand and the two girls began making their way towards Chuck's front door, and I told them I'd catch up
That's
to
a
them in a
good
second.
ass house.
I needed a second to think about everything that had just happened. I was more shaken up than I was letting on, so I leaned my forehead against the
And then, like,
steering
I got,
wheel
like,
and closed
12
my eyes in
windows,
an
man.
attempt to calm down a bit. Honestly, those few seconds with my eyes closed really helped. Instinctively, I pulled out my phone, which I hadn't even touched since the incident.
13
The
windows.
screen lit up, and I stared at the single notification that sat on the display. I had to blink a few times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My entire body froze as I stared in horror at the lone notification. AirTag found moving with you. Every emotion that I had just expelled from my body came crashing back. We were literally being tracked. I snapped out of my paralysis and jumped out of the car, examining
See,
every inch of the vehicle.
And then he
Nothing on the front-
drove home. With number one, he had a drone, so he was already on that weird shit. So he was already stalking you on a whole nother level type shit. So why drive straight home or whoever the fuck you drove to? That's
Bumper,
crazy.
nothing in the grill, and nothing on the back. I started getting desperate, checking the seats and flipping floor mats. Still nothing. By now, sweat was pouring down my neck, and I could feel the hairs on my arms and legs clamping up. I got on my hands and knees and began examining the underside of my car. I got to the tire on the driver's side and began feeling around the tire well. And there it was. It was literally taped to the underside of the well.
Niggas tracking your
Impossible
car.
to find if you didn't know what you were looking for. I held the tag in my hand
I want to thank everybody for sticking with us throughout the years. Sorry about some of it.
for a few seconds before throwing it to the ground and smashing it to pieces. Whoever had watched us on the beach with that drone knew where we were. I didn't feel safe in Chuck's driveway all alone. I picked up one of the broken AirTag pieces and ran over to Chuck's front door. I told everyone what I had discovered, showing them the AirTag pieces to prove it. They were even more horrified than I was, especially the girls. They checked their phones and saw the same notification. Chuck was particularly pissed off because we had been potentially tracked back to his house. After the panic subsided,
That's what I'm
we spent the
saying.
rest of the night in Chuck's basement and ended
Whole
up sleeping
nigga
over.
house.
A couple weeks passed and nothing happened. Honestly, my friends and I were glad to forget about the whole thing, assuming it was entirely in the past now. The only way we could rationalize it was that some creep wanted to watch some young adults hook up on the beach and track their car to scare them. It was chilling to think about, but we were relieved that the situation hadn't escalated. One Sunday morning, about 3 weeks after the incident, I got a call from Chuck. He screamed through the phone for me to drive to his house as soon as possible, which I did. When I got there, he was standing in his driveway with a concerned look on his face and some paper in his hand. I was confused until I realized what he was holding. They weren't papers, but rather pictures. I examined them more
the
closely.
drone photos.
Pictures of me from that night on the beach.
I knew it,
They were
gang.
grainy and dimly
I swear
lit,
I haven't seen
but
this
you could
video.
clearly see Sophia and I in revealing fashion. I was disgusted. I could only imagine how Sophia would feel upon finding out. Not knowing what to do, we called the police and explained the situation. They told us that there was essentially nothing they could do, but we insisted that they at least scan the photos for prints. They eventually got back to us saying the photos turned up nothing. Sophia was terrified that whoever sent them would try and blackmail her, and I feared the same. The experience was downright traumatizing. Luckily, nothing ever happened after that, probably because we had gotten the police involved. Sophia was never quite the same around me after what happened, and I can't blame her. I can only hope those pictures don't turn up later in my life.
That's crazy, gang. And nigga said later in your life. I mean, like, you look back and you
My
be
best
like, you
friend
don't give a
Ricardo
fuck
and
at
I
that
were
point.
19. At the
For
risk
real,
of
for
sounding
real.
pretentious, the two of us come from well-off North Jersey families and get to enjoy our summers down the Jersey Shore. My house is in Belmar, New Jersey, and his is in La Valette. It was a random summer night during the week, and Ricardo was driving the two of us from my house in Belmar down to La Valette, about an hour drive. To be completely honest, I
Probably gonna be
preferred
the
hanging
last
out in
story.
Ricardo's house, not only because it was a little nicer, but because the general vibe of La Valette is more geared towards kids our age. If we weren't scouring the area for a party, we could enjoy some drinks on one of the many private beaches we technically weren't supposed to be on. I could go on and on about things to do down the shore, but for the sake of brevity, I'll try my best to get to the point. As we were driving down, we agreed that we'd opt for a quieter night. No partying, links, or anything that we might normally do. The two of us agreed to snag a few beers, roll a joint, and chill on one of the private beaches under the stars.
Bro,
Honestly,
like, that
it sounded
sounds
great.
like you cannot, black or white, bro. No matter who you are, beer, a joint, and sitting on the beach underneath the stars with a blanket, bro, laying down looking at the stars, bro. That sounds like a whole vibe, bro. Like, I will kill for that shit, bro. Like, that's something that people want, that people never
The two of us
get.
had been going pretty hard with some of our other friends. A break from partying was much needed. To anyone unfamiliar with
Not
the
a
layout
party
of La
person.
Valette, there's a beach
Never
side
will
and a
be.
bay
Hell
side.
nah, too many people. Don't trust
Most of the
people enough
beaches
to
feature a
party.
really high dune and a steep drop-off as you approach the ocean. If you were to stand at the ocean edge and look back, you'd see a pretty sizable hill of sand. After drinking a few drinks at Ricardo's place, we snagged some bikes from his garage and made our way toward the beach of our choice. For whatever reason, Ricardo insisted on journeying further than I'd ever been, which I didn't quite understand since all the beaches were basically the same. I really didn't mind a longer bike ride though, so I just went with it. Eventually, Ricardo decided on a desolate-looking beach at the end of the road with no cars parked on it. Every house on the street had its lights off. I actually preferred this. This was back when weed was illegal in New Jersey, and we weren't too keen on getting caught. Plus, we did have some drinks with us despite the fact that we were only 19. We hid our bikes under
got
some
that
shrubs,
tornado warning.
and we made our way toward the beach. The two of us lit our J and smoked under the stars, the only sound being the light waves of the
Which is
ocean and
kinda
the
crazy,
accompanying
gang.
wind. The beach
If y'all don't know, I said this in the last video. I think this is my 4th video today. I don't know. I'm making bangers, man. But I'm going through Hurricane Debbie right now. Supposed to hit tomorrow. But we're getting the like beginning of it tonight, and I'm underneath a whole tornado warning right now. And just got it on my
stretched
phone.
on endlessly in both
we gonna finish
directions,
this video
and the sand
through.
felt cool underneath our feet. The two of us got progressively drunker while we filled the air with laughter and conversation. Eventually, we just laid back in the sand, watching a sky full of stars in hopes of witnessing a shooting star. That's when we heard it. I heard it first. It was almost undetectable. The sound was like a metallic buzzing, sort of like the sound you'd hear in a massive gymnasium with large overhead lights. I really can't describe the sound any better. It was a faint metallic buzz that couldn't possibly be anything caused by the beach.
Yo, this headphones make
I
this
sat
shit
up
sound
and
creepy.
stared at Ricardo, and I could tell the moment he started to hear it too. The two of us whipped our heads in every direction, looking into the darkness for the source of the drone. Strangely, it was difficult to pin down exactly where the sound was coming from. It was just too faint to tell. We were beginning to get freaked out.
Another
We were
drone,
too terrified
bro.
to move. We assumed that whatever was making that noise would go away and we wouldn't have to worry about it. There was literally no way we could be seen from our spot on that beach. It was way too dark, and the sound of the ocean.
I wonder what people actually get for like stalking people. Like is it just like the rush that makes them want to keep doing it? Is it like they have live footage on their phones from the drone? Like I don't get what makes people want to stalk people. I don't get it. For real.
Definitely drowned out any sounds we had been making.
I don't know, man.
I know it doesn't exactly sound
Some people are
scary,
just
but I'd be
that
lying if
down
I said my
bad,
heart
for
wasn't
real.
pounding out of my chest. The drone continued on, and after another few minutes, Ricardo gestured for me to follow him. I nodded my head in agreement. Leaving was definitely the best option. Just like a scene from a movie, the exact second the two of us stood up, the droning went from a 1 to a 5. It took every ounce of self-control I had to resist the urge to yell in fear. It wasn't a gradual shift. The sound literally increased in a split second, and it was definitely coming from our right. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, and a wave of fear washed over me, tensing my body from head to toe.
You know you're being watched.
We stared into the darkness and still didn't see anything. But now the drone sounded so close to us that we instinctively started running toward the sand dune. I didn't even know what we were running from. All I knew was that something was seriously wrong and there was someone or something after us. As we were about halfway to the dune, I felt Ricardo place a firm hand on my shoulder, abruptly stopping me from continuing to run. At first, I was confused,
Can't
but then
do
I
that
saw
again.
what his gaze was fixated
My
on.
heart would have
I
dropped.
glanced up toward the dune and saw it. There was a dark figure standing motionlessly at the peak of the dune. Its arms were freakishly long, almost reaching its knees. It was ridiculously
What
tall.
the fuck is that? He said his arm was long, almost hitting his knees.
I
What?
was shocked at how it managed to stand so still. It was truly terrifying. Ricardo shouted at me, breaking my gaze from the figure, and we continued running, this time parallel to the beach. We ran to the next dune entrance and sprinted up the slope. As we made
It's everything you wished for.
Wait.
Your site traffic is skyrocketing.
Is that the nigga with the
Until
drone?
This happened.
our way to the peak, we looked back at where we had just came from. I can still remember the terrifying sight that followed. Not only was the dark figure still on the dune, but there were maybe 3 or 4 more standing motionless on the slope. Each one looked like they were facing us.
Fuck
We didn't
no.
have time to go back for our bikes. Instead,
Nigga, fuck
opted to
them
run the
bike.
entire way
Oh
home.
my god, they
The next
on.
morning, we retraced our steps, but couldn't for the lives of us find those bikes. Maybe they had
They went back. That seemed like some whole cult shit. And if they would have caught y'all, nigga, who knows what would have happened? Cause what? It was one. It started off with the drone sound. Then they started running. Nigga put his hand on his shoulder. He said, "Hey yo, there's a shadow right there. Long ass nigga right there. You can see his shadow." Then they said that they saw like 4 more when they look back. So hell nah. It's either
been stolen,
some cult
or
shit
maybe
or some
whoever
paranormal
or
shit.
whatever was stalking us the night before had something to do with it. Either way, I've never experienced anything scarier on a beach and still have trouble explaining most of these events.
I would have been
The
gone.
weirdest thing for me is I was never able to determine what the buzzing drone was, and to this day,
Same.
I've not heard anything even remotely close to it.
That's what I'm like. I was like, is that the person with the drone? Because that's crazy. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, man. Make sure y'all stay safe out there. We out.